We are presenting today on SSI and work incentives, and it is pretty thorough, so let's just get right into it. Next slide. Great. So we just want to provide a disclaimer that the following presentation is only meant for educational purposes and does not constitute any kind of legal advice or counsel. And this is because every situation may be different and unique, and it's not really a one-size-fits-all. And additionally, we do try our best to update the information on these PowerPoints quite frequently. However, laws and policies are always changing. So it is possible that something could become out of date, if not now, maybe later. Great, next slide, please. Great, so let's talk about SSI, Supplemental Security Income. What is it? So Supplemental Security Income is a program that makes cash assistance payments to two different groups: people that are aged, who are generally 65 years or older, who have limited income, which is the money they receive from working, and resources, as well as people with disabilities who have limited income and resources. So we have people who are 65 years or older, and the next group is persons with disabilities. And both groups have to have limited income and resources. And we will soon later talk about what does income and resources really mean within the context of SSI. Next slide. Great. So Medi-Cal benefits. If you qualify for SSI, you automatically qualify for California's healthcare program called Medi-Cal. And as you may be aware, Medi-Cal pays for a variety of medical services for children and adults with limited income and resources. Medi-Cal is supported by federal and state taxes. And it's really best to look at Medi-Cal as one program, and that you can qualify for Medi-Cal under many categories. Currently, there are about 90 categories of Medi-Cal, and one of these categories is called SSI-linked Medi-Cal. And again, with SSI-linked Medi-Cal, if you receive SSI, you automatically receive Medi-Cal. You don't have to fill out any additional paperwork or make any phone calls or anything. So if you qualify for SSI, you automatically qualify for Medi-Cal. Great. So on this link over here, you will be able to find the SSI federal and state amounts for 2023. And that link provides general information on SSI in California and how to qualify. So as I just mentioned, generally for SSI, you must also have little or no income and few resources. So the value of the things you own must be less than $2,000 if you're single, or less than $3,000 for married couples living together. So for example, we don't count the value of your home if you live in it, and usually we don't count the value of your car. And so the chart will list the combined federal and state payment amounts. Not all SSI recipients get the maximum amount. Your payment may be lower if you have other income. And I just want to clarify, that the federal government, that it's called the federal benefit rate, and that's where the federal government provides some money to SSI. So you may have seen the phrase FBR, federal benefit rate. That's where the federal government provides some money to SSI. And the state of California also provides some money to SSI, which is known as the state supplemental payment. And this is pretty related to the cost of living adjustments, COLA, that we see each year. And they increase a little bit each year, you know, in taking into account inflation and everything. So for example, last year, the amount of the federal benefit rate was $841. The California state supplemental payment was $199.21. And together that equaled $1,040.21. In 2023, both of those rates went up slightly. So the amount increased from $1,040.21 to $1,133.73. So that would be the SSI amount for 2023. Next slide. Great. So how does work affect SSI benefits? So remember when we mentioned that SSI benefits are for people who have limited income and resources? This means that Unfortunately, if you make too much money from work, you may not be able to receive SSI benefits or the full amount. So Social Security applies a special formula to come up with your countable income. And countable income is essentially the amount of money that Social Security will use to figure out your SSI benefits. And generally during the trial work period, there are no limits on your earnings. And during the 36-month extended period of eligibility, you usually can make no more than $1,470 a month, or $2,460 a month if you are blind, or your benefits will stop. And those amounts are known as substantial gainful activity, SGA. So it's $1,470 if you are not blind, and it is $2,460 if you are blind. And those work expenses can be deducted because of your disability when your earnings are counted. And if you have extra work expenses, your earnings could be substantially higher than $1,470 before they affect your benefits. And the substantial earnings amount usually increase each year, which we will go over in a bit. But it's important to note that some of your work expenses may include the cost of items or services you need to work, but that are also useful in your daily living. So it can include co-payments for prescriptions, counseling services.
What is that?
Can we, I just want to make sure everyone is muted. So it can include transportation to and from work, a wheelchair, counseling services, co-payments, etc. So those are work expenses that could also be useful in your daily living. Okay, so what is countable income? Countable income is the income, which is essentially money that is made by a person or their family that is left over after Social Security makes certain deductions, where they subtract or ignore a certain amount of money. So Social Security will then use the amount of countable income to figure out if you can get SSI benefits and to figure out the amount of SSI benefits you will receive. Next slide, please. Great. So what are the allowable deductions to gross earned income? So just a reminder, gross earned income is the amount of money made from work before certain things are taken out, such as taxes. So Social Security does not count most of your earned income when it figures out your SSI payment amount. So we're going to go over unearned income exclusion and earned income exclusions. So with regards to unearned income exclusions, Social Security applies a $20 general income exclusion that is first applied to any unearned income that you may receive. So what is unearned income? Unearned income is simply money that is not earned. So money that you do not receive from working. For example, unemployment benefits or money received through investments. So generally speaking, not everything an individual receives is considered to be income for SSI purposes. Generally, if the item cannot be used as or to obtain food or shelter, it will not be considered as income. So let's talk about an example. If someone pays an individual's medical bills or offers free medical care, or if the individual receives money from a social services agency that is a repayment of an amount that they previously spent, that value is not considered to be income to the individual. So the main unearned income exclusions includes that first $20 per month, as well as income set aside or being used to pursue a plan for achieving self-support by a disabled or blind individual, state or local assistance based on need that is wholly funded by the state or local area in the state, rent subsidies under the Housing and Urban Development Program, the value of supplemental nutrition assistance, food stamps, and the first $60 of infrequent or irregularly received income in a quarter. So that's the unearned income exclusion. For most people, it's usually just that $20 exclusion that it pertains to unearned income. Next slide. Great. So now we're going to talk about earned income exclusion. So unearned income is money that you don't earn from working, whereas earned income is money that you do earn from working. And so Social Security will not count the first $65 of your earnings in a month and what 1/2 of what remains after that. So what that means is that Social Security counts less than 1/2 of your earnings when they figure out your SSI payment amount. And the principal earned income exclusion, so it'll be that first $65 per month, as well as any unused portion of the $20 unearned income exclusion, plus 1/2 of the remainder. It also includes impairment related work expenses and blind work expenses, which we will get into in a bit, as well as income set aside or being used to pursue a plan for achieving self-support, and as well as the first $30 of infrequent or irregularly received income in a quarter. But for the purposes of this presentation, the most common earned income exclusion is that first $65 plus 1/2 of the remainder. And on the next slide, which we can go to now, we are going to go over an equation just to kind of visually see it because it can be kind of confusing. So let's say I make $1,300. That is my gross earned income. This is my wages before anything is deducted. What I'm going to first do is subtract the $20, the general income exclusion, the unearned income exclusion. I'll get $1,280. Now I am going to subtract $65. That's the earned income exclusion. That's from what you earned, what you worked. We will now get $1,215. And because SSI does not count half of earned income, we will divide it by 2. And $607 will be our countable earned income. But we don't stop there. We have to get the 2023 SSI base rate, which we talked about. That's funded both from the federal and California state supplement rate. So that's $1,133.73. We are going to subtract the countable earned income from it. And our SSI payment will be $526.23. So when we want to figure out our total monthly income, we have our gross income and our SSI payment, and our total monthly income would be $1,826.23. And I just want to point out that we will be everyone will be receiving this PowerPoint at the end of the presentation. So if you want to go back and kind of use this formula for your own purposes, you are obviously more than welcome to do so. And again, I just want to note that this is the SSI base rate when you see $1,133.73. When we talk about substantial gainful activity, that's $2,460 for a person who is blind and $1,470 for a person who is not blind. Great. So now we are going to discuss additional deductions because we spoke about the unearned income exclusion, the earned income exclusion, but depending on your situation, there may be other expenses that can be excluded for purposes of SSI. And today we'll be discussing impairment related work expenses and blind work expenses. Next slide. Great. So what are impairment related work expenses? Generally, these are costs for items or services that you need in order to work because of your disability. So Social Security will deduct the costs of an IRWE from your accountable income when determining your eligibility for Social Security disability benefits. There is a criteria that you must meet to qualify for an impairment-related work expense. So the item or service enables you to work. You need the item or service because of a physical or mental impairment. You pay for the item or service yourself and are not reimbursed by another source, such as Medicare. The cost is reasonable, meaning that the cost represents the standard charge for the item or service in your community. So for example, if this isn't necessarily related to it, but if you wanted a car, you're not going to get a Rolls Royce. It would, be a reasonable one, the standard charge of a car, and it must be approved by Social Security. And you may be eligible for an IRWE if you receive either SSDI or SSI due to a disability. And Daniel, in the latter half of the presentation, will discuss the differences between SSI and SSDI. But if you receive SSI, Social Security will deduct the IRWE from your gross income when they determine your payment amount. If you receive SSDI, The IRWE will be deducted from your gross earnings when Social Security determines if your work level is enough to meet substantial gainful activity. And again, substantial gainful activity describes a level of work activity and earnings that help determine your eligibility for SSDI or SSI. And you also must provide proof that you paid for the item or service. So that can be a verified statement that you've signed, and copies of canceled checks or paid receipts as proof of payment. IRWE deductions are also not allowable if you've been, could be, or will be reimbursed for the cost of the items or services. So let's quickly discuss an example of impairment-related work expenses. So let's say I receive SSI benefits due to a disability. I earn $1,025 from work, and this is my only income. Each month, I do pay $250 for a special transportation service to commute to work. I require this service. It's necessary for me to get to work because of my disability. Social Security will consider this expense to be an IRWE and deduct the cost from my countable income when determining my SSI cash payments. So we can go on to the next slide. Transportation is just one of the examples, but I do want to make clear an IRWE deductible cost would entail a modification to your car related to your disability that would allow you to commute. Or, if public transportation is the only means for you to be able to get there because of your disability, that can be an IRWE deductible. However, what would not be deductible as an impairment-related work expense is the base cost of your vehicle. SSI will not deduct the entire cost of getting a new car. But if it's, to modify it because you don't have any mobility in your hands to drive, that can be an example of a modification, or for it to be wheelchair friendly. Similarly with service animals, what would be IRWE deductible would be a guide, expenses paid for a guide dog or service animal that enables you to work. This can include the purchase of the animal itself, training, food, licensing, and veterinary services. However, what would not be deductible would be the expenses for a non-service animal, so like a pet. And we can, talk about prosthetics. What would be IRWE deductible is an artificial hip or an artificial replacement of an arm, leg, or other part of the body. But what would not be deductible is any prosthetic device that is primarily for a cosmetic purpose. And we sometimes get this question in previous training, so I'm just going to quickly bring it up, is does an expense count as an IRWE if I also use that item or service outside of work for daily living? And yes, as long as you need the item or service to enable you to work, it can be considered an IRWE. So for example, if you have a hearing impairment, your employer may provide you with an accessible phone as a reasonable accommodation. However, your employer wouldn't supply you with a hearing aid because you use it outside of work too. So since your hearing aid enables you to participate in the workplace conversations with, your coworkers, your supervisors, and clients, your hearing aid may be considered an IRWE. So that link there will provide a more extensive list of impairment-related work expenses, what they are, examples. It's similarly, as we spoke about, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. And so your particular situation may be applicable to here. So now we're going to talk about blind work expenses. Great. So what are blind work expenses? These are expenses necessary to work, and to qualify, you must be eligible for SSI based on your blindness. However, the items themselves do not have to be related to your blindness. So you must be eligible for SSI based on being blind, but the items themselves don't have to be related to the inability for you to see. And so blind work expenses are treated differently than IRWEs. They do result in a higher SSI payment amount, and that is because blind work expenses is deducted after the half deduction. So blind work expenses generally allow blind individuals to exclude reasonable, unreimbursed expenses from income. And similar to what we talked about, what is considered to be a standard reasonable charge, A reasonable expense is the amount customarily charged for covered or similar services and supplies. And again, just with SSI, it can be, it applies to those who are under age 65 or those who are age 65 or older and was receiving SSI payments due to blindness for the month before becoming the age of 65. So let's talk about some examples of blind work expenses. If we could go to the next slide. Great. So similar to impairment related work expenses, we have service animal expenses, transportation to and from work. We also have federal, state, and local income taxes, social security taxes, attendant care services, visual and sensory aids, translation of materials into Braille, professional association fees, and union dues. And similar to the impairment related work expenses, you can click on that link and that'll provide a more extensive list of examples of blind work expenses. And remember, the items themselves do not have to be related to your blindness. Okay, great. So now we are going to do the same calculation, but we are going to include the impairment related work expenses and blind work expenses deductions. So again, let's say I make $1,300. That is my wage before any deductions, before taxes are taken out. I'm going to subtract the earned and unearned income exclusions, which was $65 and $20, so $85. That's $1,215. So usually we would just kind of stop there and, you know, divide by 2 and get our countable income. But here, if you have an impairment related work expense, you're going to first subtract from 1,215. You'll get that number. And then we're going to divide by 2, and that's our countable earned income. Now, let's say you also have a blind work expense, then you would deduct it there. So that's why blind work expenses provide a lot more. It's because you are subtracting after you divide by 2. And that's where we would get our countable earned income. Great, thank you. Okay, so now we are going to talk about SSI work incentives. And there are 2 different types of SSI work incentives. We have the student earned income exclusion and the plan to achieve self-support. And work incentive employment supports, they generally help people with disabilities, and blind SSI recipients go to work by minimizing the risk of losing their SSI or Medicaid benefits. Next slide. Great. So what is the student earned income exclusion? So the student earned income exclusion allows a person who is under the age of 22 and regularly attending school to exclude certain earnings from income. So let's go over some of the terms here. Regularly attending school means that you take 1 or more courses of study and attend classes. So for college, that would be at least 8 hours a week. For grades 7 to 12, that could be for at least 12 hours a week. And so in this case, it may be a high school student that works part-time. Regularly attending school could also mean being in a training course to prepare for employment for at least 12 hours a week, or 15 hours a week if the course involves shop practice. So this may include, you know, construction courses, cosmetology school, or courses to become an auto mechanic. And sometimes less hours are required under this exclusion for reasons beyond the student's control, such as illness or disability. And we can go to the next slide. Great. So the student earned income exclusion is deducted before the general income exclusion or the general income exclusion. So for 2022, the amount of earnings that Social Security can exclude each month was it was $2,040 a month until it excluded the maximum of the year for the year of $8,230. Now for 2023, the amount of earnings that Social Security can exclude each month is $2,220 a month until it has excluded the maximum for the year of $8,950. And again, so that increased due to the cost of living adjustment. So for the year 2023, the amount of earnings that Social Security can exclude is $2,220 a month until it reaches the maximum of $8,950. So let's just go over an example, including those amounts in play. So let's say I am a student who earns $2,220 a month in June, July, and August of 2023. And in September, I return to school and I continue working part-time. I earn $900 a month in September through December 2023. So using the student earned income exclusion, I can exclude $2,220 of my earnings each month in June, July, and August. And I can exclude all of my $900 earnings in September and October, which would be 900 times 2, 1,800. So through October, I will use up $8,460 of my $8,950 yearly limit. And so excluding $490, which is $8,950, the maximum, minus $8,460, my earnings, excluding $490 from my November earnings will use up my yearly limit. So my remaining wages after deducting monthly and yearly limits will still be subject to the earned income exclusion of $65 per month and 1/2 of the remaining earned income. So Daniel will now talk about the Plan for Achieving Self-Support program. And I just want to note that we will be going over questions and taking questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much.
That's right. Thank you so much, Nadia. And we'll try to provide the correct links in the chat. I believe some of them were not working, but we'll do that. Thank you so much, Nadia. So yeah, I'm going to continue with the Plan for Achieving Self-Support, otherwise known as PASS. So this plan allows a person to set aside other income besides SSI or other resources for a specified period of time so that they can pursue a work goal that ultimately helps them reduce or eliminate the need for SSI or SSDI benefits that they currently receive. So for example, if somebody receives SSDI, wages, or other income, right, they could set aside some of that money to pay expenses for education, vocational training, assistive technology that's used for employment-related purposes, or to even help the person start a business, right, if that's a vocational goal that they have, a work goal that they have. Of course, the expenses have to be related to achieving that specific work goal. And a PASS can help you establish or maintain SSI eligibility, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so like I said, Social Security will not count the income that's set aside under a PASS, right, or the plan for PASS, when it figures the SSI payment amount. Nor will it count the resources that are set aside under a PASS when it determines initial and continuing eligibility for SSI. In other words, Social Security will exclude income and resources that are set aside under a PASS or a plan to achieve self-support, and it's not going to affect eligibility, whether income or resource eligibility. Next slide. So now, what are the requirements for a PASS? There's a few. One, the PASS, the plan to achieve self-support, has to be designed specifically for the person. And there's various ways that this can occur. One can resort to or use a PASS cadre, which is a group of workers that help with PASS applications specifically. They can also get the help from a vocational counselor if someone has that. Let's talk about a PASS cadre more specifically. So again, this is a group of workers that help with PASS applications, and there's a PASS cadre in most areas. There's one in the Sacramento area. I don't know the exact number for that cadre, but if need be, we can provide the information after the presentation when Mina sends over the materials. So that's one requirement. The next requirement is that the PASS needs to be in writing. And one can use a specific form, right, an application form, in order to initiate that process. And here we have a link to a past application. And essentially, it's a 12-page form with several sections, and the form can be found on the internet, on the web, on the Social Security website, or one can simply call the local Social Security office to request a paper copy of it and have it mailed to the person's address. So that's the second requirement. The next requirement is that the person has to have a specific work goal that they are capable of performing. So the goal can be to be a car mechanic, to have their own small business, to be a cook or a chef, to be an Uber or Lyft driver, to be a mail person, to become a dentist, right? That as long as the person is capable of performing such work activity, or they can attain that work goal, then that's something that it'll be able to fulfill that requisite. The next requirement is that there has to be a specific time frame for reaching your goal. And in the form, it tells you, usually broken down by months and years, and the time frame that you're looking at, it can range, right, depending on your work goal. It can be 1 year or 2 years, 3. So that's another requirement, to have a specific time frame. The next thing that has to be shown is that the income that's received and the resources that are used, right, under the pass, that they'll be used to obtain that work goal, right, to reach that work goal. So that has to be demonstrated. The next thing is you have to show how you will use your income and resources to reach the work goal. So one thing, setting them apart, but the next thing is to make sure to demonstrate that you're using them to attain a specific work goal. And again, oh, sorry, if we can go back. Thank you, Raymond. The important thing, right, is to make sure that any money that's retrieved under pass or set aside under pass, that it not be commingled with other funds, right? It's important to keep it separate. If that means, having a separate account where you specifically put in the funds that you save, that you save under a pass plan, it's important to make sure you don't commingle any funds. And then, of course, the last thing is that it has to be approved by Social Security. But once approved, you can set aside any money for certain expenses. And the other thing we want to mention is that this pass, if one is obtained and approved, will be reviewed periodically by Social Security, just to ensure that the plan is actually helping the person make progress towards their work goal. Next slide. Thank you, Raymond. Okay, so let's say we're in a situation where somebody's receiving SSI benefits, and due to a reason, right? Let's say the person has too many resources or income, right? Putting them over the SSI limit, or if Social Security finds that the disability has improved enough where the person can work now, and they lose their SSI benefits. So what happens to Medi-Cal if someone loses SSI benefits? So when someone receives SSI and then they happen to lose those benefits, or those benefits are suspended, it doesn't mean that that person automatically loses their SSI-linked Medi-Cal, which Nadia previously mentioned. No, there's a period of time, right, where the person will continue to have coverage until the county can determine and reevaluate what other possible category of Medi-Cal coverage that person can receive. 2 decades ago, there was a lawsuit called Craig v. Bonta in California. And essentially what this allowed, it allowed people who lost their SSI benefits to continue receiving Medi-Cal coverage. But during that time, the county has to reevaluate eligibility for other programs or categories under Medi-Cal. And like Nadia stated, there's over 90 categories. So a county eligibility Medi-Cal worker would have to evaluate to see if the individual would be eligible under another category. So although one may lose their SSI benefits, it doesn't mean that they automatically lose their Medi-Cal as well. Just something important to note. Next slide. Here you'll see examples of various programs under Medi-Cal or categories under Medi-Cal that a person may qualify for if they lose SSI benefits. And this is just some of them, right? It's not the full extensive list. And db101.org, which is an organization called Disability Benefits 101, is a great resource and website where you can learn more about these specific Medi-Cal programs. We're not going to cover them in detail during this presentation, but this is a good resource to reference if you want to learn more about these categories. Thank you. Okay, SSI reporting responsibilities. Some of you who have loved ones on SSI benefits, or have children on SSI benefits, you probably have encountered reporting, right, obligations where you are supposed to report changes, significant changes to employment, right, if you have one, resources that you happen to obtain, settlements that you may obtain, if you purchase things that are needed to work due to a disability or due to blindness, right? All these things that have to be reported to Social Security. Of course, there's many ways to report it. You can call the national number, a local office. You can fax this information. You can mail it. You can write something, right, and present it in person at the local office. There's various ways you can report changes to fulfill your reporting responsibilities. The thing that we would want to mention here, right, is just to make sure that you keep copies or have evidence of information that you submit. Usually, right, Social Security will provide a receipt, but not always. And so it's important to make sure that you keep records of everything you report. And even if you speak to a representative over the phone, make a note of the day that you called, the time that you called, and to whom you spoke to, right, the name of the representative, because that'll be helpful in the future in the event that they would try to allege that you didn't report some information that you had to. So as a general rule, everybody who's under SSI has reporting responsibilities. So if something major has changed, right? If you start or stop work, you need to report it. If you come across money, a substantial amount of money through a settlement, let's say you were in a car accident, right? And there was a personal injury case and you received settlement money because of that, that has to be reported. If you're on IHSS and you receive retroactive benefits or payments, right, for IHSS, that has to be reported. So as a general rule, it's important to abide by these reporting responsibilities, because if you don't, it can lead to an overpayment. So yeah, so important to make those report those changes. And next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the difference between SSDI and SSI. And we'll briefly, Nadia's already mentioned it, right? But SSI, you know, is based on age or disability, right? And those people who are aged, who are 65 years or older and disabled, who have limited income and resources. Those people are generally eligible for SSI. Now, SSDI is different. So SSDI is based on disability, and it's also based on sufficient work credits. So work credits are obtained through work earnings or income, or through self-employment income, if that's the case. And a person can get a maximum of 4 work credits per year of work. In 2023, 1 work credit is the equivalent of $1,640 of income. So, and of course, the maximum amount of credits that one can obtain in a year for working is 4. And the amount of work credits required to be eligible for SSDI depends on the age of that person and the amount of work credits that that person has or has obtained. And the next slide, we will review this information, but that's the general principle, right? SSI and SSDI are 2 different programs. A person can receive SSDI when that person has enough work credits. So there needs to be a work history where work credits are involved. SSI does not consider work credits. For SSI, a person has to have limited resources and income, and have a disability or be 65 years of age or older. So in theory, right, somebody who has never worked in their life may be eligible for SSI, but a person that has worked, right, and has obtained work credits may be eligible for SSDI as well, right? So it's all fact specific and it's all contingent on a person's specific situation. Next slide. So this is, we're going to kind of briefly provide an overview, right? Just a basic overview of how these work credits are calculated, right? How much you would need in order to be eligible for SSDI. So let's consider somebody who's under 24 years of age, right? Can they qualify for SSDI? Yes, in certain circumstances. So somebody who's under 24, if they have 6 work credits earned the 3-year period before disability starts, they may be eligible for SSDI. So let's say that I'm a 23-year-old individual and my doctor diagnoses me with schizophrenia, which could qualify, right, for disability benefits under Social Security. So to be eligible for SSDI, one thing that I would have to satisfy, I would need 6 work credits in the last 3 years. So ages 20, 21, and 22, right? I'm already 23. So I would need to accumulate 6 work credits in that period in order to be eligible for SSDI. Now, the amount of SSDI that I would get, right, that can vary. It could be very little, especially if I don't have a lot of work credits. Now let's talk about somebody who's age 24 to 31. So the work credits needed, right, are work credits for half the time between age 21 to the year the disability began. And we have an example here. It's a little bit more complicated, but let's say John becomes disabled at 25 years of age. So 21 years of age to 25 years of age is 4 years. And 4 years divided by 2 is 2 years. So 2 years worth of work credits would be needed, or 8 work credits would be needed to be eligible for SSDI. Now let's consider someone that's age 31 or older. So the older you get, the more work credits you're going to need in order to be eligible for SSDI. Generally, a person has to have at least 20 work credits in the last 10 years before the disability began, and the older you get, right, it could be more, and up to 40, right, up to 40 work credits as a general rule. And this is just a quick glance of how these rules work. But just as a general rule, it would be good to consult, for example, the SSDI resources on the Social Security website. Next slide. Okay. And another question we also often get, is it possible to be eligible for both SSI benefits and SSDI benefits? Yes, it's not too common, right? But it happens, right? So the SSI and SSDI programs are 2 different programs, but there are occasions when someone is eligible for both benefits, or be dual beneficiaries. So a person can receive both SSDI and SSI, but that all depends, right? This is known as concurrent benefits. So the amount of SSDI that someone receives can affect the amount of SSI benefits that someone also receives. Here we have a very basic example of how this concept works. Of course, these amounts are not accurate, but let's say John begins receiving SSI benefits at the maximum amount, let's say $1,133 per month. John then is then eligible for SSDI, right, at a certain amount. Whatever amount he gets can reduce the SSI amount. The reason being is because SSI is based on need, right? It's a needs-based benefit program. You need to have limited income, limited resources. So in order to supplement, and some would argue that what SSI already provides is probably not a livable wage or livable amount of money, but the purpose of receiving both is to supplement one or the other, right? So if somebody gets a reduction in SSI, it's because they're supplementing with more SSDI benefits. And here we have that example. And this doesn't include the applicable exclusions. And then in 2023, the maximum SSDI benefits that someone can get, the maximum is $3,627 for a month. But this is going to be different for every individual, right? Depending on their age and the amount of work credits that they have. On the other hand, in 2023, the maximum of SSI benefits in California is $1,133.73 a month. Somebody who's independent, right? An adult, independent adult individual. So in some cases, right, if somebody has a work history and they have accumulated enough work credits and they're then disabled, right? They become disabled. If they are eligible for SSDI, they should go ahead and apply, right? Because in some cases, it might result in a higher benefit rate. Next slide. Okay. Expedited reinstatement. And this applies to both SSI and SSDI. So if your SSI or SSDI benefits end because of your earnings, meaning you started working, right, and your wages have increased beyond the substantial gainful activity limit, and you stop work within 5 years of when your SSI or SSDI ends, then Social Security may be able to start your benefits again, reinstate your benefits again without you having to complete a new application. We're working with a 5-year period. So while Social Security determines whether you can get benefits again, it can give you provisional or temporary benefits for up to 6 months while they evaluate, right, and see if you're still eligible. And the question is, oh, why would they need to see if I'm still eligible? An example of why they would need time, right, to determine whether someone would be eligible would be to conduct, let's say, a medical eligibility review for SSI or SSDI, because we're working with a 5-year time frame. So conditions can change in 3, 4, or 5 years, right? So let's say it's been a while, right, since you've been on SSI or SSDI benefits. Social Security may want to reevaluate, right, to see if your condition has changed in any way, whether it got better or worse in some cases. And here we have reference to page 29 of the Red Book. And the Red Book is an extensive manual that provides detailed information about employment supports for those receiving SSDI or SSI, disability-based SSI. And it's a good resource if you want to learn more about this in particular. Next slide. Okay, Ticket to Work. So Ticket to Work is a program, and people that receive SSI or SSDI may be eligible. And it's for people with disabilities who want to work and participate in planning for their own employment. And this increases the available choices when one wants to obtain employment services, vocational rehabilitation services, and other supports that one may need, right, to maintain a job. And this is free voluntary service for people that are from age 18 to 64, have to be an adult, right, and not of retirement age. So there are approved providers, right, called employment networks or ENs. And they're public or private organizations that have an agreement with Social Security to provide employment services to beneficiaries with disabilities, whether people on SSI or SSDI. So Ticket to Work is a great program for those who want to get back into the workforce, right? They're disabled, they at this moment probably cannot, but they want to eventually rely less and less on SSI or SSDI benefits. And we have a number here if you want to participate in such a program, and you can call, right? And one of the representatives can help you, and you can initiate the process. Next slide. Okay. So when will Social Security review your disability? It happens, right? Social Security every once in a while will evaluate a person's disability to see if it has gotten better, or if there's been medical improvement. And they use three standards, right? Whether improvement is likely, whether improvement is possible, and whether improvement is not possible. And each one, right, will determine whether the person will remain on SSI benefits or SSDI benefits. So Social Security will not perform a review to see if your condition has medically improved while you're actively pursuing an employment goal. For example, if you're under PASS, or if you're using a Ticket to Work provider, or sometimes even if you're receiving Section 301 payments. But something we do want to mention is age 18 redetermination. So Social Security defines disabilities for adults and children differently, right? So when a person that is under 18 years old is who's receiving SSI benefits turns 18, the rules change, right? For example, they no longer consider the parent's income. Now the individual who's now an adult, only their resources and their income is considered, right, for SSI eligibility. But then in addition to that, the disability under SSI or Social Security, those rules change. They're now deemed an adult. So the rules are different. And so when that happens, when somebody turns 18, Social Security will evaluate that individual. It could take a year sometimes, right, for them to evaluate them, but it's possible. And at that point, they may determine that now 18-year-old is no longer eligible for SSI benefits. If that's the case, of course, you can resort to appealing if you disagree, but that's something to look out for if you have children who are receiving SSI benefits who are going to turn 18. Next slide. Okay, benefits planning query, or BPQY. And this is actually a very useful tool, and it provides information about a beneficiary's disability cash benefits, their health insurance. In most cases, if you're receiving SSI, it's going to be SSI-linked Medi-Cal, scheduled continuing disability reviews, representative payee information, and work history, if applicable. And it's a great planning tool for a beneficiary. And we have Social Security has a handbook that provides a lot of information in regards to BPQY. And we'll put it in the chat, and you can follow that link, and it'll provide you more information, how to request one, for example. But you can also call your local Social Security office or the national Social Security hotline and ask them that you want to request one. And another thing that I do want to, sorry, can we go back to the BPQI? Thank you. Another thing that's very helpful with BPQIs on the SSI side. So if you obtain one, you'll see beneficiaries listed as disabled individual when benefits are paid under the adult disability standard, or disabled child when the beneficiary is receiving SSI benefits under the childhood definition of disability. So it'll tell you whether the person's a disabled individual or disabled child. If it says disabled child and the person's already 18, right, it should be an indication, okay, they're going to have their redetermination interview, right? They're going to go through the age 18 redetermination. So something to look out for. Next slide. Okay, WIPA, WIPA, WIPA. So this is an acronym for Work Incentives Planning and Assistance, and this is a program that provides individualized, in-depth, employment-focused benefits, counseling, and work incentives planning in all 50 states in U.S. territories. That's a mouthful, huh? And this is funded primarily by Social Security. And through WIPA, right, you have a certified coordinator through WIPA, right, that's able to help with the following: understand how employment can affect or influence benefits, can help you develop work incentives so you can be successful, can help you coordinate with groups or agencies that can help you pay for training or services in order for you to return to work if that's something you want, or if that's a goal you have. There are some requirements. You have to receive benefits from Social Security based on a disability, so SSDI or disability-based SSI, or it could be a situation where your benefits were recently suspended due to wages, but you were receiving SSDI or SSI. You have to be at least 14 years of age. You can't be eligible to receive Social Security retirement benefits, right? So that cutoff age 54. And you must be employed, be self-employed, or be looking for a job. And then to learn more about WIPA, we have the number here. And Disability Rights California does have its own WIPA, a Work Incentives Planning and Assistance program, but it only offers services to certain individuals in San Diego, Riverside, and Imperial counties. That said, though, every area, every zip code, right, is going to have its own. There's going to be WIPA. You're going to have a WIPA program. So it'll just be a matter of calling that number and trying to figure out what WIPA program services your location or your zip code. Next slide. Okay, so what is DAC or DAC? So DAC stands for Disabled Adult Child Benefits. And these are benefits that are paid from the Social Security wage record of a parent. So if a parent is living, a DAC recipient receives 50% of the parent's benefit amount. But if that parent is deceased, that recipient can receive 75% of that amount. And an adult can receive DAC benefits on their parent's work record if the following can be shown, right? That the person requesting it, right, the beneficiary is unmarried, or if they are married, they're married to someone who gets Social Security Title II benefits, or SSDI. In other words, the person has a disability that began before age 22, and the person was a dependent on their parent at the time of the application, the time of the parent's death, or at the time that the parent became disabled. So these are all requirements that have to be satisfied in order for someone to be eligible for DAC benefits. Next slide, please. Okay. So Nadia previously stated, right, when somebody receives SSI benefits, they automatically qualify for SSI-linked Medi-Cal. So for DAC benefits, there is a connected Medi-Cal program. It's simply called DAC Medi-Cal. However, this is not automatic. Someone has to initiate that application and that process because there are requirements that have to be met. But we'll briefly describe, right, what DAC Medi-Cal entails. So it's full scope, no cost Medi-Cal coverage to qualifying individuals who receive DAC benefits. And these are the eligibility requirements. The person has to be receiving DAC benefits. They must have previously received SSI, which began before age 22. They're now age 18 or older, and they lost SSI after July 1st, 1987 because of the following. You started getting Social Security DAC, you got an increase in Social Security DAC, or you had a cost of living adjustment increase, or a COLA increase in Social Security DAC benefits. So in order to be eligible for DAC Medi-Cal, those requirements have to be fulfilled. And then, of course, there's income and resource limits, but something I should add that typically, right, the typical $2,000 resource limit for DAC Medi-Cal doesn't apply anymore. Recently, July of 2022, that Medi-Cal asset limit increased. I believe, do you remember exactly what amount that was, Nadia? Let me see. I think it was $130,000 per individual. Yeah. So of course, it's a lot more than $2,000, but something we want to point out. Although there's a resource limit, it's increased recently. It's only for DAC Medi-Cal, right? Or for DAC benefits. This does not apply to somebody that receives SSI-linked Medi-Cal. You're still under a $2,000 resource limit for SSI and SSI-linked Medi-Cal. Next slide. Okay, how do you ask for DAC benefits? Unfortunately, you can apply online, right? The best way is to contact your local Social Security office, right, and let them know that you're interested in applying for DAC benefits. And sometimes when a parent is retiring, that's part of the screening process. They'll see if there's any eligible individuals who may qualify for DAC, and that may initiate the process, right? But if that doesn't happen, then you can yourself call Social Security and let them know my child, I believe, is eligible for DAC. I'm in the process of getting retired and I want them to be considered, right? Or I want to initiate the process to apply for DAC benefits for my child. So how to ask for DAC Medi-Cal benefits. So once you receive confirmation, right, that the person is eligible for DAC benefits, you can then use that, right, and provide that to your county medical eligibility worker or your county, right, to ask that the county process an application for DAC Medi-Cal. And here we have some information. As a general rule, right, what to do if you lose DAC Medi-Cal program benefits. You're going to get something in writing, right, indicating that Medi-Cal coverage will continue until Medi-Cal eligibility is redetermined, right, is reevaluated. But in any case, right, when there's any adverse action from the county, you should receive a notice of action, something in writing that explains that there's an adverse action, something is going to end, let's say coverage for Medi-Cal is going to end, and then it should provide you reasons as to why, and then also it should provide information as how to appeal if that's something you want to pursue, if you disagree with that determination. And also we want to talk about aid paid pending. As a general rule, right, you have a certain amount of time to appeal. But it's important if you want to maintain the amount of benefits that you're receiving. This applies to most public benefit programs. If you receive a notice of action or notice of planned action, right, from Social Security, any notice, right, that indicates that there's going to be an adverse effect or change happening with the benefits, appeal as soon as possible and request that you continue to receive the same amount of benefits through the process of an appeal. And so, yeah, so don't wait till the very last moment. Like, say, for example, if they're going to suspend SSI benefits, you have a 60 day and 5-day grace period. So 65 days to appeal a decision by Social Security generally. But it's best to appeal as soon as possible so that you can maintain those benefits, right? Usually for Social Security, it's within 10 days of receiving a notice of action or notice of planned action. So yes, so that's would be a golden rule to abide by. And I think now we're kind of at the end of the presentation. If we can stop the recording to start taking questions.